challenges and passing valid tests for a long period of time can justify the acceptance of a claim. But mere age or persistence does not warrant accepting a claim. Examples of appeal to tradition. Sure, I believe in God. People have believed in God for thousands of years, so it seems clear that God must exist. After all, why else would the belief last so long? Gunther is the father of Conan. They live on a small island, and in their culture, women are treated as property to be exchanged at will by men. Conan. You know, father, when I was going to school in the United States, I saw that American women are not treated as property. In fact, I read a book by this person named Mill in which he argued for women's rights. Gunther. So, what is your point, son? Conan. Well, I think that it might be wrong to trade my sisters for cattle. They are human beings and should have a right to be masters of their own fate. Gunther. What a strange and newfangled notion you picked up in America. That country must be even more barbaric than I imagined. Now think about this, son. We have been trading women for cattle for as long as our people have lived on this island. It is a tradition that goes back into the mist of time. Conan. But I still think there is something wrong with it. Gunther. Nonsense, my boy. A tradition this old must be endorsed by the gods and must be right. Of course, this mode of government is the best. We have had this government for over 200 years and no one has talked about changing it in all that time. So, it has got to be good. A reporter is interviewing the head of a family that has been involved with a feud with another family. Reporter. Mr. Hatfield, why are you still fighting it out with the McCoys? Hatfield. Well, you see, young man, my father feuded with the McCoys and his father feuded with them, and so did my great-grandfather. Reporter. But why? What started all this? Hatfield. I don't rightly know. I am sure it was the McCoys who started it all, though. Reporter. If you don't know why you refighting, why don't you just stop? Hatfield. Stop. What, are you crazy? This feud has been going on for generations, so I am sure there is a darn good reason why it started. So I aim to keep it going. It has got to be the right thing to do. Hand me my shooting iron, boy. I see one of those McCoy skunks sneaking in the cornfield. Fallacy. Bandwagon. Also known as peer pressure. Description of bandwagon. The bandwagon is a fallacy in which a threat of rejection by one's peers, or peer pressure, is substituted for evidence in an argument. This line of reasoning has the following form. Person P is pressured by her peers or threatened with rejection. Therefore person P's claim X is false. This line of reasoning is fallacious because peer pressure and threat of rejection do not constitute evidence for rejecting a claim. This is especially clear in the following example. Joe. Bill, I know you think that 1 + 1 equals 2. But we don't accept that sort of thing in our group. Bill. I was just joking. Of course I don't believe that. It is clear that the pressure from Bill's group has no bearing on the truth of the claim that 1 + 1 equals 2. It should be noted that loyalty to a group and the need to belong can give people very strong reasons to conform to the views and positions of those groups. Further, from a practical standpoint, we must often compromise our beliefs in order to belong to groups. However, this feeling of loyalty or the need to belong simply do not constitute evidence for a claim. Examples of bandwagon. Bill says that he likes the idea that people should work for their welfare when they can. His friends laugh at him, accuse him of fascist leanings, and threaten to ostracize him from their group. He decides to recant and abandon his position to avoid rejection. Bill. I like classical music and I think it is of higher quality than most modern music. Jill. That stuff is for old people. Dave. Yeah, only real woozies listen to that crap. Besides, Anthrax rules. It rules. Bill. Well, I don't really like it that much. Anthrax is much better. Bill thinks that welfare is needed in some cases. His friends in the Young Republicans taunt him every time he makes his views known. He accepts their views in order to avoid rejection. Fallacy. Begging the question. Also known as circular reasoning, reasoning in a circle, petitio principii. Description of begging the question. Begging the question is a fallacy in which the premises include the claim that the conclusion is true or directly or indirectly assume that the conclusion is true. This sort of reasoning typically has the following form. Premises in which the truth of the conclusion is claimed or the truth of the conclusion is assumed, either directly or indirectly. Claim C. The conclusion is true. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because simply assuming that the conclusion is true, directly or indirectly, in the premises does not constitute evidence for that conclusion. Obviously, simply assuming a claim is true does not serve as evidence for that claim. This is especially clear in particularly blatant cases. X is true. The evidence for this claim is that X is true. Some cases of question begging are fairly blatant, while others can be extremely subtle. Examples of begging the question. Bill. God must exist. Jill. How do you know? Bill. Because the Bible says so. Jill. Why should I believe the Bible? Bill. Because the Bible was written by God. If such actions were not illegal, then they would not be prohibited by the law. The belief in God is universal. After all, everyone believes in God. Interviewer. Your resume looks impressive, but I need another reference. Bill. Jill can give me a good reference. Interviewer. Good. But how do I know that Jill is trustworthy? Bill. Certainly. I can vouch for her. Fallacy. Bias sample. Also known as biased statistics, loaded sample, prejudiced statistics, prejudiced sample, loaded statistics, biased induction, biased generalization. Description of biased sample. This fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about a population based on a sample that is biased or prejudiced in some manner. It has the following form. Sample S, which is biased, is taken from population P. Conclusion C is drawn about population P based on S. The person committing the fallacy is misusing the following type of reasoning, which is known variously as inductive generalization, generalization, and statistical generalization. X% of all observed AS are BS. Therefore X% of all AS are Bs. The fallacy is committed when the sample of AS is likely to be biased in some manner. A sample is biased or loaded when the method used to take the sample is likely to result in a sample that does not adequately represent the population from which it is drawn. Bias samples are generally not very reliable. As a blatant case, imagine that a person is taking a sample from a truckload of small colored balls, some of which are metal and some of which are plastic. If he used a magnet to select his sample, then his sample would include a disproportionate number of metal balls. After all, the sample will probably be made up entirely of the metal balls. In this case, any conclusions he might draw about the whole population of balls would be unreliable since he would have few or no plastic balls in the sample.